Hola and aloha, my friends. Welcome back to the Surfer's Library. I'm Billy Jack, your guide through the pages of surf history, culture, and legend. Today, we're diving into chapters 8, 9, and 10 of Not Done Yet by the legendary Corky Carroll. Another episode of great stories of surfing's golden era by one of surfing's greatest surfers. Today, we're going to hear about how Corky contributed to the shortboard revolution, how he won the 1967 International Big Wave Championship in Peru, and even surfed the cold, forbidden waves of my beloved Oregon. Surfers Nat Young, David Nuuhiwa, and Jeff Hakman are just a few of the icons of surfing that are going to make appearances in Corky's memoirs this episode. All this and much, much more. So let's paddle out. Chapter 8. The Brave New World. In June 1965, I graduated from Huntington Beach High School and moved out of my parents' home for good. I had rented a little cottage in Dana Point that was just perfect for myself and my dog Boris. Boris was a Springer Spaniel that was a great dog, but not the prettiest in the world. It had actually been my dad who gave him the name Boris after the not-so-pretty horror movie actor Boris Karloff. I was living off my weekly salary from Hobie to surf and my Jansen retainer. Sometimes money would be thin, though, supporting myself full-time and spending most of my time driving all over the coast surfing and promoting the boards took every cent I was making. I can vividly remember one time when I was totally out of money and there was no food in the house. It was a Thursday night and payday was on Friday. The only thing there was to eat was my dog Boris's very last Gainsburger. For those of you who do not know what that is, it was a dog food patty that they used to sell, which was basically just normal dog food shaped into a burger-like form. Boris was hungry and so was I. The only thing to do was fry that sucker up and split it with him. I put salt and pepper and the last of my ketchup on my half. Tasted just like it was, dog food. I tried to tell myself it was just bad corned beef hash, but no, it was dog food. That summer, Tom Morey put on the very first professional surfing contest, actually offering a cash prize for the first time in surfing history. It was the Tom Morey Nose Riding Invitational. The premise was that it would be a timed nose riding event. The guy who rode the most time on the nose, considered the first 25% of the board, would win. They held it at California Street in Ventura, which was a right-hand point break. To make things fair, they had both regular foot and goofy foot divisions. Invitations were sent to the leading surfboard manufacturers who would be allowed to enter 2 of their team riders. Tom's objective here was to stimulate surfboard design. As nose riding was the big deal at the time, he figured a timed nose riding event would push the surfboard makers into coming up with new and better designs of boards to ride the nose, and it worked. The design trio of Hobie Alter, Phil Edwards, and Mickey Munoz successfully came up with the concept for the nose rider shape that is still in use today. Concave under the nose, a very straight rocker with some lift in the tail. They added a very heavy fin to add drag so the board would slow down, allowing the rider to stay on the nose longer. The Hobie factory team was Mickey Munoz in the regular foot division and me in the goofy foot division, and we both won. The cash prize was a whopping $250 each. Aside from our Hobie nose riders, there were some interesting and pretty unusual boards that turned up. The only ones close to what we had were the Gordon and Smith team of Mike Hinson and Skip Fry. Mike had made a couple of nice boards with wide noses and flat bottoms. Good, but ours were better. Rusty Miller had a board with 2 bricks glued to the tail, and Dewey Weber had 2 pontoon kind of thingies glued under the nose. The classic entry was Mike Doyle's. He had made a board that was 10 feet long. However, it had a stringer that stuck out the back for an additional 10 feet. Thus, he claimed his board was actually 20 feet long, and therefore the first half of the surfboard itself would be considered the nose. Obviously, this was what you would call a rule beater. Tom Morey figured this was not in the spirit of the contest and would not let Mike get away with it. He could ride the board, but only the first 25% would be considered the nose. Mike, not happy at all with this revolting development, decided to split and not surf in the contest. After that event, I decided maybe it was time for me to get out of the juniors division in the contests. I had just won the nose riding contest and had already won the USSA championship previously at Salt Creek surfing against the men. So even though I was still 17, I switched in mid-year to the open men's division and won the first two events. I guess it was the right decision. At the same time, Hobie had decided to release both Corky Carroll and Gary Proper's signature model boards. The idea was mine would be designed for West Coast and Hawaii surf, and Gary's would be for the East Coast. I was both happy and not so much about this. I was happy because this would be a big bump in my income, but not so much because the majority of surfboard sales were on the East Coast at that time. In fact, still are. Hobie assured me that they would sell mine back there too, and it was just a good way for him to cover the market as well as possible. In any case, this was a good thing and I was stoked. Things were starting to come together as far as this being a pro surfer thing went, and I was embarking on a really good run. This was all new territory, and with each little addition to ways to make this work, it was breaking new ground. It truly was, as far as professional surfing went, a brave new world. At the beginning of summer, about a week after I graduated from high school, my parents' house in Surfside burnt down. I was living in Dana Point on my own full-time now and read about it in the paper. I rushed up there to find my dad shifting through the ashes looking for anything he could salvage. His first words to me when he saw me arrive were, "Sorry, kid, all your trophies are gone." Geez, like that mattered. Everything was gone. But he was always so proud of me, and in his mind, the fact that he lost some of my trophies was important to him. I was much more concerned about the fact that this was their home, and now it was gone. In the long run, I think that this was what started the beginning of the end of my parents' marriage. My mom had been in the bathtub when the fire started next door, and she barely got out of the house before it totally went up. She was very nervous anyway, and this shook her to her core. Probably made my dad drink more, too. Bad combination. They wound up renting a house down the way a little bit in Sunset Beach, but I don't think things were really ever the same for them. As I was totally on my own now and starting to have a little bit more money in my pocket, it became easier for me to travel around more. In the winter, I would go to Hawaii and started a love affair with Pipeline, the surf spot, that lasted for over 30 years. The last time I rode it was on my 50th birthday. I'll get to that story later. It was on one sort of last-minute trip over there to catch a really good swell that I first really hurt my back. Pipe was really good, and back then, unless it was during December when everybody was over there, hardly anybody surfed there. I had it almost to myself for 3 solid days in late October. On the third afternoon, I was out with just one other guy, a really good surfer named Mike Turkington, when I took a very bad wipeout and got rammed into the bottom sitting down. I had a huge pain in my back and crawled up onto the beach and burrowed into some warm sand to try and make it feel better. It didn't, and I could not sleep that night. The next day, I flew back to California and saw my doctor. He said it was probably a sprain and to take it easy and it would go away. So I did, and it got better, but never really did go away. At times, it would get sore and make it hard to surf, but it never got to the point where I felt I couldn't surf or couldn't deal with stuff. Nonetheless, it was always there and always something I had to be careful about. Along with being able to go back and forth to Hawaii pretty much as I pleased, I was also able to go skiing all I wanted, and I loved to ski almost as much as I loved to surf. I began going up to Mammoth Mountain, which was about an 8-hour drive from my house. Sometimes I would surf in a contest on the weekend, drive to Mammoth on Sunday night, ski Monday to Thursday, drive home Friday, and surf another contest the next weekend. This wasn't an every week thing, but it did happen a number of times. Starting that year, I was able to get in at least 60 days of skiing every year along with surfing in just about every event that came along, not only in California, but all over the place. That December, they held the first Duke Kahanamoku Invitational in Hawaii. The top 24 surfers in the world were invited to compete, and the invitation included airfare, meals, and rooms at one of the top hotels in Waikiki. Each surfer was also given a bag of clothes and a beautiful gold trophy, which was a statue of Duke that looked like an Oscar for competing. Having one of those Dukes was a very cool thing. I think I wound up with 7 of them in all. and they were extremely special to me. They held the contest on a good day in Big Surf at Sunset Beach on the North Shore. I made the finals, which for me was a huge success. Jeff Hakman, who was another kid my age and lived on the North Shore, won it. Jeff was an amazing surfer and a really cool guy. I'd become friends with him and another kid who lived out there named Jock Sutherland. We were all the same age and all up-and-coming grummies. I would have liked to have won, but it was really great seeing Jeff get it. Just making the finals made me feel good, and I think I showed people I was not just a small wave California guy that could only go left in beach breaks. Some people probably thought that. I could also ride big waves and go both ways as well. Chapter 9. The Beginning of the Big Change. 1966 would be the real beginning to my best years as far as being a competitive professional surfer. I won a ton of events that year, including the men's division, paddleboard race, and Duke Kahanamoku Trophy for Best All-Around Surfer at the United States Championship. Things were picking up all the way around. I do want to mention something here, though, that is noteworthy. When we were sitting on the beach waiting for our final heat to go out at the U.S. Championship, the 6 of us finalists were watching the junior division. David Nuuhiwa was in it and probably turned in the best performance of his competitive life. There are many photos documenting him perched on the nose doing a killer soul arch. It seemed that all of us sort of in unison went, "Wow, glad he's still in the juniors." This is important for a number of reasons. David was without a doubt the best nose rider of that period. I don't think anybody would argue that. He had a beautiful, smooth style, and he would just get up there and stay and stay. At that time in the United States, nose riding was a really big deal, and he was the king of the nose riders. Shortly after the U.S. Championship, they held the World Championship in San Diego. The top surfers from everywhere were coming to compete. Just before the contest was supposed to start, we started hearing rumors about a guy from Australia named Nat Young, who had been surfing the previous week up north of Santa Barbara. He was reported to be riding some new kind of board and was really looking good. When we checked in for the contest, they made us produce the boards that we would be riding in the event, and were told that we could not change during the week-long event. This was a first, had never happened before. I guess the Australians were sure that when we saw Nate riding whatever it was he was going to ride, that we would all go out and make new boards overnight. Which, knowing what we know now, actually could have happened. The truth was that Nat's board was not all that different than ours. It was just shorter. Not a lot shorter, but shorter enough to make a remarkable difference in performance. His turns were quicker, and his overall performance on the wave was, well, the best way to say it, overall better. We could see this right off the bat as the competition got underway. This event was going to actually be 3 contests and 1 final heat at the end. On the first day, I beat Nat in the semifinals, but he came back through a loser's heat to make the final. David was on fire and got the longest nose ride on record at that time. I started off good, but got caught inside for most of the heat. David won, Nat second, Jock Sutherland third, and me fourth. After that first day, David would wind up losing early and Nat didn't lose again. By the time the last day came around for the ultimate final heat at Ocean Beach, Nat had so many points that he already had the title won. Jock would wind up in second place and me in third. That was a huge day for surfing as, at least in my mind, it was the very beginning of a monumental change that would be ultimately called the shortboard revolution. Many people have different versions on this, but I'll give Nat Young total credit for starting this big change right then and there in October of 1966. That was also the year that I was starting to make a little bit of money. I was thinking that I should invest in something or maybe buy a house. The house idea seemed to be the best bet, but there was the problem that I was only 18. So I went to my parents and I told them I wanted to buy a home, and if I put up all the money, could they take out the loan in their name? And when I turned 21 and had established good credit, we could get it transferred into my name. They thought it was a great idea and agreed. My mom helped me shop, as she was a dedicated real estate looky-loo, and one of her favorite things to do was look at property, even if she had no intention whatsoever to buy anything. She just loved to look. We found a nice little duplex in Capistrano Beach. This was ideal because I could live in one unit and rent out the other to help with the monthly house payment, taxes, and insurance. I put in the down payment, and my dad got a loan for the financing. I would pay him the payment each month, which included taxes and property insurance. How cool was that? I was 18 and a homeowner. Chapter 10, The Evolution, 1966 to 1967. After the World Contest in San Diego, I went on a sort of binge experimenting period, trying to come up with a direction for shorter boards. Hobie was amazing with me and gave me a free hand to have as many boards made as I wanted. In the quest to come up with a not only workable but also a sellable design for the next step in my surfboard model line. I had been working with very thin and flexible boards up until this point. However, I totally gave up on that idea when it became clear to me that the direction should be shorter. Thin did not work so well with the first shorter boards because we were also trying to keep as much flotation as possible as we were taking away length. I tried a slew of different shapes and took a little off this and a little of that and came out with the mini model in December 1966. The first incarnation of this board came mostly in 7-foot 11-inch to 8-foot 11-inch lengths. They also more or less resembled a longboard that was just shorter. For that time period, they were pretty radical and allowed me to surf in a completely different manner than I had been doing only a couple of months previously. It seemed, at least in my mind, that every day I went surfing was a whole new experience, and I was able to break new ground almost wave to wave. It was such a truly exciting time, and I just got engulfed in it. 1967 started off great for me. I went to Peru and won the International Big Wave Championship at Punta Rocas, being the first to dethrone local Felipe Pomar at his home break. I also got incredibly sick while down there and spent a week in the hospital trying to recover just before the final heat of the championship. I had flown down there with the infamous Mickey Dora, Malibu's Black Knight of surfing, and he came to visit me in the hospital. Word was that they were not going to release me in time for the finals of the championship. I was still very weak and not taking solid food yet. I asked Mickey to help me escape as I had not come this far and made it all the way to the finals to let myself get stuck in the hospital and miss it. So Mickey came up with a plan where he would engage the doctor in discussion in the hallway while I slipped out the door and jumped into the elevator that was right next to my room. The car was just outside the front door on the street. This was in downtown Lima. Sounded like a good plan. First snag was that I had no clothes there. I had been taken to the hospital in an ambulance after having been found passed out on the floor of the bathroom in the home I was staying in. All I had was the hospital gown I was wearing, and it only came to my waist. So, for all intents and purposes, I was naked from the waist down. Nonetheless, I went with the plan, and when Mickey had the doctor engaged with his back to the door of my room, I snuck out and jumped into the elevator and headed down. Second snag was that this was not the normal elevator. It was a service elevator. When it opened, I was in the kitchen. There were nurses and cooks and workers all over the place, and there I was running out of the elevator looking for a way out. Everybody was just staring at me with wide eyes. I saw an open window across the room and I went for it. How I made a perfect dive through that thing, I do not know, but I did. Would have gotten a 10 in the diving out of window Olympics. Did I mention that I had no idea what was outside the window or even if I was on ground level? Lucky for me, I landed in a little grass strip that was next to the sidewalk. Mickey was coming out of the front door, which was about 50 yards away and pointing towards the car. He opened the back door and I ran and jumped in just as our driver, one of the local surfers, screeched out of there. People on the street were in a state of shock as this half-naked gringo dude went streaking by and leaping into a getaway car. You could not script this stuff. The capper was that I won the contest the next morning. The hospital had actually sent the police to arrest me for leaving without paying my bill. But thankfully, our Peruvian host settled up on that and I was not taken to jail. The surf was pretty big and they gave us an hour for the final heat. Best 5 rides would count for your total score. I was not feeling great and I paddled out far and just waited for the biggest sets. I caught a total of 6 waves, all of them big, long, and high scoring. From what I understand, the Peruvian contest officials were not real happy, as I was the first one to beat the local defending champion, the great big wave rider Felipe Pomar. But even so, they were very gracious, and I got a big old gold and silver trophy. Following that adventure, I went to Florida for what was billed as the World Small Wave Championship. I was now riding the new mini model full-time and was the only one riding shorter boards in just about every event that year. I had a very hard time convincing anybody that this was the way to go. Surf shop owners did not want to stock them, and most of the other competitors thought they were better off staying on their longboards. The catch was that I was winning almost all the events, including that one in Florida. Some of the shops would order mini models that were like 9 foot 6 inches long and weren't mini at all, just longboards with mini model stickers on them. It was a hard sell. One of my favorite memories of this period was when I went to Hawaii with a small quiver of mini models from 8 foot 2 inches to 8 foot 11 inches that ran from small wave to minigun. When I ran into infamous surfboard designer guru Dick Brewer, his matter-of-fact quote was, "They will never ride shortboards in Hawaii, period." Much later, he made an 8 foot 11 inch semi-gun for Gary Chapman, and to this day claims that it was the very first minigun, and he alone invented the shortboard. I love that. Now, I'm not saying that I alone did. In my mind, it was an evolution that took place over a few years, and many hands were involved in it. But I am saying it's pretty funny that Dick takes credit for this when, like a year before he made one himself, he told me beyond a shadow of doubt that they would never ride shortboards in Hawaii. This is meaning no disrespect to Dick. He is a great and legendary shaper and designer. Some of my best big wave boards ever were shaped by him when he worked for Hobie. But it is just an example of the uphill battle I was going through in order to get the surfing world to get on board with under 9 foot lengths during that first year. I would wind up winning the United States Championship again, then traveling to Puerto Rico to win the Puerto Rico International, and finally finished off the year by winning the first International Professional Championship in Big Surf at Steamers Lane in Santa Cruz. That was one of the best years I had competitively speaking, and by the end of the year, people were finally starting to open their eyes and minds to the fact that maybe this shortboard thing was really going to happen. Another good thing that happened to me in November 1967 was getting married to a great girl named Cheryl Hendricks. Cheryl had moved to San Clemente from Hollywood, and we had been dating for most of the year. She was very pretty with long brown hair and brown eyes, and to this day, one of the best people I have ever known, and truly is one of those with a heart of gold. During the summer, we made a trip to Oregon together where I surfed in the Oregon State Championship at a place called Otter Rock. It was probably on that trip that things really gelled between us and led to us getting married. It was also part of a growing thing with me surfing in that part of the world. I had been up there previously for a Jansen convention held in Portland. On a free day, I hired a taxi driver to take me to the coast so I could see if there was any surf up there. To my amazement, I found great waves and a perfect left point. From that time through the early to mid-1970s, I spent a couple of weeks a year in the fall surfing all over the Oregon coast, but mostly around Seaside where that left point is. In the beginning, I would be the only person out. Then local guys started surfing more and others moved up from Santa Cruz and other areas of California. By the early 1970s, it was getting localized. The last time I went was during the years I was living in Sun Valley, Idaho. More on that later. And it was the closest surfing spot. Always loved it up there. The combination of mountain-esque scenery with surf and ocean is alluring to me. Although now, as I'm writing this, I would never be able to deal with the cold like I could back then. Let's face it, it's really cold up there. It was around this time when I was on one of my surf trips up there that I found a really cool house for sale in a little cove that had a surf spot out front. There was a big rock with a left going off one side of it and a right on the other. It was a big 5-bedroom New England-style place that came with like a half acre of land on a little knoll above the beach. The price was about $10,000. At that time, this was a considerable amount of money, but I found myself thinking about how I might be able to buy it. It was around then a dude named Jim Jenks was trying to raise money to start a surfwear company that he was going to call Ocean Pacific. Jim went to a number of people in the Dana Point area who might have money to invest and offered a 9.9% ownership of this new company for an investment of $10,000. There was that number again. The funny thing was that I had almost exactly that in my savings account. This was a really hard decision to make. Buy the really cool beach house in Oregon or invest in Ocean Pacific. I wasn't really sure that Jim was going to be able to pull off the surfwear thing. And I also thought it should have been called Ocean Atlantic because the majority of the surfing business was on the East Coast. So I mulled it over and over in my mind and did exactly what any 19-year-old surf and fun crazed dude would do. I bought a brand new 911 Porsche. Hell yes. Was there really any other choice? Did OP go on to become one of the most successful and profitable surfing businesses in history? Well, yes. Did the house in Oregon wind up being worth a couple million? Well, yeah, there's that too. Do I still have the Porsche? Well, no. Did it cost me a fortune in speeding tickets and insurance plus sky-high maintenance costs? Yeah, that too. Did I ever regret this choice? Sometimes a little bit, yes, but not anymore. I love my life right at this minute. And if I had not done things the way that I did them then, I might not be where I am now doing what I'm doing. So in that regard, I don't regret those decisions, as stupid as they were at the time. Hobie bought the share offered to both him and to me. In later years, when I was struggling to find a way to survive, I mentioned the multi-millions he had made from that investment in OP. I asked him if I could have some, thinking it only fair. He smiled big and just said, "Nope." Oh well. In November, they held the first international pro-am at Steamers Lane in Santa Cruz. There would be a cash prize for the pro division. The surf was big, and I was the only one riding a shortboard in the finals. Although this was common for me that year, this was probably the last time that happened. In any case, I had a very good day and took home a winner's check for a whopping $400 as I remember. After coming back from Hawaii that December, Cheryl and I decided to spend the rest of the winter in Puerto Rico. I had liked it when I went there for the international championships. When they had announced that the World Championship would be held there the next fall, we had just found out that Cheryl was pregnant too, so I thought it'd be a great getaway before the baby was born. We arrived in early January 1968 and wound up renting a little concrete house on a hill overlooking the beach. An amazing coincidence was that my pal Tom Morey, same as the nose riding contest Tom Morey, had just gotten there and was living right next door with his wife. It was a great bit of luck as the four of us had a wonderful few months hanging out. We surfed and talked story and all kinds of weird theory stuff that Tom would come up with. He's like surfing's mad scientist. I had taken 4 boards with me, one which was a swallowtail with the setup for 3 fins, one in the middle and 2 on the outside. This way it could be ridden as either a single fin or a twin fin or a tri-fin. The big problem was that this was in the time of big heavy fins. This board had 3 fin boxes that were also heavy. So even though it was way ahead of its time design-wise, it still was not really that functional, as all the weight from the extra fins and boxes made it so tail-heavy that it just didn't work very well at all. It did stimulate a ton of discussion between Tom and me about multi-fin boards and just about every other kind of cosmic idea we could come up with. I didn't understand much of it, to tell you the truth. Tom's mind thought in much farther out spheres than mine. I just knew how to ride the things and had some ideas on what made them work. Meanwhile, Tom is relating the whole thing to space travel and spiritual levitation. My most productive contribution to most of the conversations was the occasional, wow. But then, wow was a big word in the late 60s, used for all sort of things. So actually, it went a long way. When the surf was flat and we weren't in some deep cosmic conversation, the two of us would go spear diving to score fish for dinner. We had bought a couple of spear guns from the local dive shop. The deal was whoever speared the first fish didn't have to hold the bag. Unfortunately for me, Tom was a much better shot than I was, so pretty much every time I would end up holding the bag. On one of those days when I was on bag duty, we had nailed quite a few fish and the bag got filled up. As we were close to shore and were diving right on the reef at a spot named Maria's, which was where we surfed most of the time, I decided to swim in and empty the bag so we could get a few more. As I was cruising in over the shallow reef, I came to a spot where there was a break, and I could see the sand about 10 feet deep. All of a sudden, a huge fish came swimming out from under the reef. Wow, I thought. See, there's that wow again, just like that. There was no way I could miss that sucker. I decided to swim down and spear that dude, figuring that if I brought in this fish beast, I would never have to hold the bag again. Great plan. Until just before I was going to pull the trigger and it spread out. Yeah, I said spread out. It wasn't a big fish after all. It was a ginormous octopus. I mean, we're talking Captain Nemo stuff here, folks. Release the Kraken. Holy freaking moly. Forget the big waves. This was one of the most terrified I've ever been in my life. All I remember is looking into that big eye and knowing I had to get out of there immediately. I launched out of the water and ran to the beach on the tip of my fins. I know I went in right over the reef and had the cuts to prove it. I was huddled in the sand shaking. Cheryl was trying to figure out what was the matter with me. I was just pointing to the water and muttering, "Monster!" It was at this point in my life that I came to the revelation that it was definitely not a good idea to dive where you surf. You wind up knowing way too much about what is under you. And this point was further driven home in my little surf-soaked brain a couple of weeks later. One of the really cool things about that winter in Puerto Rico was that there was almost no other surfers around most of the time. On the weekends, a few would come out from San Juan, but other than that, it was just us and a guy from the East Coast named Wayne Williams, who was camping by Maria's, and a couple of locals. Tom and I spent many days checking out all the surf spots on that end of the island. One day, we had driven to a very remote beach called Playa Hobos. It was pretty far from anywhere and was one of the most beautiful little places I had ever seen. Like a palm-treed paradise with a little beach and very nice peaks breaking outside. On this particular day, it was about 4 to 5 feet and very good. We were sitting out there trading waves and probably talking about something cosmic when, far off in the distance, we spotted these 2 fish skipping on the top of the water and coming in our direction. One fish was about 2 feet long, and just behind him was a fish about 4 feet long. Obviously, the one in the front was trying to get away from the one in the back. They were just skipping across the water and going really fast. The one in the front was just trying to keep its tail away from the open mouth of the one behind. They went right by us, going really fast and off into the distance as far as we could see. Finally, and I should have known better, I asked Tom if the little fish was going to get away or would the big fish wind up eating him. Tom did the classic chin rub and thing, and then calmly proclaimed that the big fish would wind up eating the smaller fish. Sadly, I asked why. He explained in this perfect surf scientist manner that the little fish was using up more energy than the big fish because he was smaller. Therefore, he would wear out faster, and when he did, the big fish would have him for lunch. I thought about this for a few minutes and I said, "Wow, that really is kind of sad." To which Tom point blankly said, "Well, kid, that's life in the food chain." The food chain? Oh man, I don't like the food chain. I will never forget that. Put this little lesson together with the encounter with the Moby Dick of octopuses, and my in-the-water comfort zone had been greatly compromised. On land, people are pretty safe and secure, I guess unless you live in an African jungle or something. Set foot in the water, and we become part of this dreaded food chain thing, and we are not at all that high on the chain either. After that winter, I have never gone spearfishing again. It was a nice time down there, though, and we surfed a ton of good uncrowded waves. I got to know the spot where they were scheduled to hold the upcoming World Championships the next fall very well, and was feeling I would have a good chance to win the title. Well, that is going to do it for chapters 8, 9, and 10 from Corky Carroll's autobiography, Not Done Yet. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow the podcast, share it with a friend, and come back next time as we continue our journey through this incredible book. If you'd like to help support the podcast, you can do so by visiting buymeacoffee.com/The Surfer's Library. Your support helps cover the platform fees that keep the show going each month, and any little bit is greatly appreciated. Also, if you'd like to sponsor the podcast or have any story ideas or feedback for the podcast, please contact us on Instagram or by email at thesurferslibrary@gmail.com. So until we paddle out again, This is Billy Jack reminding you to keep your toes on the nose, your stoke high, and always, always, always support your local surf shop. I'll see you out in the lineup.